Hello, this is Marsha McLean, your professional sister, and today I have with me James Harris. We're going to be talking about mental health in African American men as well as trauma. This cast was set up before the tragedy of George Floyd, and we will be talking about that today and discussing that. I am going to ask you, please share and like. If you know of any African American male youth, please ask them to come in and like and listen. It'll be 30 minutes to an hour long. This is here as a resource for you to provide you support and information, and also acknowledge your pain, acknowledge what you're going through, and be able to have some resources. I do have another gentleman that I'm hoping that's going to pop on. He has some issues going on, Sunday with kids at home and all those type of things. And as soon as he comes on, I'll definitely connect him. I'm going to jump over to James. I want James to have an opportunity to tell you a little bit about himself and all the services that he provides. James?
Hey, Marsha, what's going on? I definitely appreciate you for having me. I'm right here in Richmond, Virginia. I'm a father of one. My daughter name is Peyton. She's 8 years old. I'm a multi-business owner, entrepreneur. I have an art gallery, a waffle spot. I have multiple houses, and I also have a spot called the Healing Hub, which provides services, wraparound services to individuals within the Richmond area. Yoga, mindfulness. I do my outpatient there, and a host of other different services. And also, I am in private practice as well as community-based services. Um, and I'm a veteran. United States Army, two deployments, one to Iraq, one to Afghanistan. So definitely appreciate you for having me. I'm also the founder of a movement called Men to Heal, which focuses on men overall wellness, getting them back in tune to things like physicals, early detection, cardiovascular disease, and of course the mental health side of it, which me being a clinician or somebody within the field, I thought it was important to enlighten men on um, just educating them on different diagnoses and how the mental health can affect them physically. And I'm also new recently an author of Man Just Express Yourself, which is is a book, but it's an interactive journal for boys and men of all ages to learn better ways to express themselves and identify their feelings and work better with the family, their friends, the coworkers, and stuff like that. So you can get that on Amazon or on my site, mentalheal.com. Again, appreciate you for having me, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much for that knowledge about what you do and what you provide. And I'm going to put his link in right now. And we also have our other gentleman that's going to be joining us. I'm going to bring him into the live right now. Hello, Reese. This is Marsha. You're on live with us,
Hey,
with me
Marcia.
as well as James. As
Hey,
you
James. How
can,
you doing?
Hey, what's
could
up,
you
boss?
please
All
give
right.
the audience a little bit of information about you, please?
Yeah, sure. My name is Reese Palmer. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist located here in Columbia, South Carolina. My wife and I own a group practice here in Northeast Columbia, and we work with, I primarily work with couples. My wife and I do some co-therapy together as a husband and wife with husband and wives that are looking for marital counseling or premarital counseling. We also do some family work together, but our practice provides family work. We work with children and adolescents, individual adults, as well as provide psychological testing.
Okay. Do you have any products? Do you have any books or do any type of master's class or anything like that that the audience needs to be aware of?
No, I have not completed my book yet. My wife is on me every day to get the book done, but we don't have a book yet. So I would just direct people to our social media platforms and also to our website, to navigate to our website to find out some more information about Palmer Counseling and Consulting.
Okay, so these are colleagues of mine today. We're going to jump right in and talk about men, trauma, and mental health, but we will be addressing the George Floyd. And because that's the main one, people are looting, protesting, still being involved with the police. I want to jump right into that. And I will ask if it's okay if James will go first, because we had some discussion offline. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I think it would be a benefit if I start with him first. James?
Sure, sure.
Well, I mean, first we got to understand that this situation is unfortunate, but people are not in a position to properly grieve due to the fact that it's been multiple incidents that were coming off
Yes.
pretty much week after week. Starting from, if we look at the young lady Brianna that was killed in her home, and
Mhm.
then of course we had Mr. Audrey who was jogging, and now the untimeliness of what taking place with Mr. Floyd. So just people are upset, they're angry, and this is the way that they're grieving and trying to cope with the situation. So I guess for us as professionals, we understand how trauma can be displayed with anger and aggression.
Mhm.
As a way to, I guess, immediately get that gratification and relieve some tension. But there are better and healthier ways to do that. But, in our position, we're unable to, I guess, chastise those people for displaying it the way they are trying to obtain attention for it.
Reese, if you want to jump in and tell us
Sure.
your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what James has shared. Unfortunately, because of the recurring nature of these types of incidents where people of color are being killed in the hands of law enforcement officers, we barely can kind of start to process one of them before another one happens and another one happens. And so before we have an opportunity to really process the pain and the trauma and the fear, especially those of us, not so much the fear for ourselves, but maybe we have young black men, nephews, grandsons, sons that we're trying to raise and want them to be able to grow up and be able to enjoy life without having any fear of their life being taken senselessly like this. We just don't have enough time to process it. There's just not enough time to really sit down and have some dialogue about it and talk about it as a community. And so it's very unfortunate. And it's what we call complex trauma, right? It's like one after another, after another, after another. And it's just very, very unfortunate that it continues to happen. And I do think it's incumbent upon us in the clinical field to help others understand that, this is what rage looks like. This is what oppression looks like. When people don't feel like they have any other options, this is what it looks like. So,
Why do you think it keeps happening over and over? Is there something that needs to be done different in the police force, or like some type of testing to see if they have these characteristics to be racist? Now, I do want to be realistic. I do think it's something that's ingrained. But do you think there needs to be some type of testing done so that these people can kind of be identified? Because of this particular police officer, he had 18 complaints and he was still on the job.
So
And uh-huh.
go ahead. You can go ahead and
And
finish.
so I'm just trying to figure out what can we do instead of saying let's have some dialogue. I want to see some action. Do we need to like kind of petition, for police officers to be tested, to offer them free anger management? What do we need to do to start identifying the ones that are angry, that do not respect or value everyone as a human? What do we do? Because I'll be honest with you, I was so disgusted and I made the mistake. I watched that whole video and
yeah.
I really lost it at the end when he was crying for his mother. And
Mm.
I had to have a conversation with my son, who's now a father himself. And he was like, that could be my son. And he was like, the way that man just disregarded him like garbage. And then the other police officers that were there did not try to do anything. And so I'm trying to figure out, what do we need to do for this to kind of stop happening? Like, I could talk to my local police, and every police officer is not bad. I'm not saying that. And sometimes all of us have a bad day. But when you put your knee in the neck of someone and not get up at all, and he's screaming, crying for his mother, and you still don't have any compassion, he should have been dismissed long ago, in my thoughts and opinion.
Yeah, so I would say systematically, though, it needs to be changed, not only with the police department, fire department, bankers. Racism is embedded within all type of organizations. The sad and
Absolutely.
unfortunate part is this person is a public servant and have to respond to calls and have to deal with the public. So that what makes it even worse and even hard to, I guess, accept, because, you know, day to day, and to have that many charges or that many accusations brought up without being suspended or without being reprimanded, I guess, until this incident happened, it's absurd. It shouldn't have taken a death for somebody to say, hey, listen, maybe you need to sit out a little bit longer in the field, or maybe we need to retrain you, or maybe you do need different classes and stuff like that. But I mean, you and I both know, being within the field, and Dr. Reese, like you said, you do groups and stuff. You know, when people are in front of you, we go off the presenting issue, the presented problem. So, and regardless of what his history is, if he's in our group or in our session and he's presenting as somebody who's willing and able to do his job, then that's the presentation, or that's the perception that we have to go by, unless it's multiple reports from somebody else, and we can, you know, add that into our consideration. But for the most part, he probably did have some type of other training or groups or something he had to attend, but his presentation probably led him, okay, all right, he's fine, you know, just had a rough day, or, you know, so it would be difficult to say, but I would say changes need to occur within the department and how they handle not only civilians, but how they receive training. And if you are willing to just stand around and observe somebody doing wrong, or, you know, break the law and do things that are morally incorrect or injustice, that overall is poor training, because there's no way around if I'm in a session with you two and I hear you doing something that's ethically incorrect, or just, you know, negligence towards a client of ours, I would step in, you know. So I think it's something else overall within the system. You know, and that specifically, that department, they had a lot of different issues and deaths and stuff like that. So, you know, the previous police chief spoke out, and I think he won a suit against them, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a lot of different issues within that department itself. But domestically here, it's a lot of different issues and a lack of training and suitable information being passed down by the departments as a whole, I think.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that information. Reese, do you have anything to add to that, or thoughts on takeaways from what he said?
Yeah, I would just piggyback on what James just shared, that, you know, this is a much bigger issue than one police officer, right? This is a systemic issue that doesn't start with just the Minneapolis Police Department per se, or any of these local police departments that have been involved with the death of a person of color while being taken into custody. You know, this starts with the highest office in the land, and we see the challenges, you know, with the administration that we currently have. And unfortunately, you know, I think that, you know, when we try to root out what the issue is, it's easy to go to, you know, one small cog in the wheel, but there's a much bigger, unfortunate institutional racism history that we have to deal with, that we're still grappling with as a country. And so there's a lot of wonderful things about these United States, but we have a very, very serious racial equality problem that we still have not overcome. And, you know, people of color have been struggling after 400 years of slavery, and then Jim Crow, and then the Civil Rights Movement. I mean, we unfortunately have not made enough progress, I believe, in this country so that these things cannot happen. And so when you look at it at the individual police department level, you know, these police officers are going on what the culture is in that particular police department. If the culture is one of diversity, if the culture is one of inclusionism, if the culture is one of cultural respect, and they're doing cultural sensitivity training as a regular part of their training, just like they have to get their physical training, they have to go to the range, they have to do all of these other things. If that particular department does not prioritize that, then these types of incidents will continue to happen. And so I think that, you know, as James said before, this particular officer, Derek Chauvin, had several prior incidents that had been brought up on him. And I don't know what their policy is in the Minneapolis Police Department in terms of how do you handle this after this person has had the first or the second or the fifth, you know, offense that's brought to him, or accusation of excessive force or something that has happened while he was, you know, bringing someone into custody. So I think that it does, unfortunately, show us that this is a microcosm of what's happening across the country in a much smaller way in this particular incident. We're seeing it happen over and over and over again. And I think that you would really have to see what are their policies, what are their, is it even a priority for that particular police department to make sure that these officers are trained in cultural sensitivity and how to handle these situations. And the other bystanders, I feel like they're just as guilty as Derek Chauvin, who had his knee in the back of George Floyd's neck. I think they're just as guilty. They should have stepped in and told their colleague. They should have said, man, look, this is not the proper way to handle it. He's subdued. He's under control. There's no reason for that to have happened.
Mm-hmm. And so, and this kind of ties into what our conversation was going to be about, Black men, mental health, and trauma. Because what the question that I have is, right now I have a beautiful 3-year-old grandson, curly hair, light skin, beautiful little baby. But when does he go from beautiful to a target, you know, to becoming where they look at him as aggressive, like he, you know, like no longer a person? We'll walk around, even like yesterday, he had his little mask on because of COVID-19. Oh, he's so cute, he's so precious. But my thoughts are, when does he slide into the category of being a Black man? He's a Black man. He don't deserve to be respected. He doesn't deserve the same rights as everyone else. And so trying to figure out that link and how it connects to like the prison system, the education system, and like you said, systemic racism all over. When does that change? And how do we help Black men and other minorities to know that they are supported and that we're here for them? You know, how do we do that? Either one of you can answer or provide input at that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in real quick. As far as when that ages or that stage developmentally that our young boys become transition from being innocent children, right, to boys, from just boys who are trying to grow up and learn and grow and mature to a perceived threat by someone. I wish there was a magical way that we can determine that. You know, at some point we may have thought, okay, when they're teenagers or when they're in their early 20s, right? Yeah. But you're seeing younger and younger kids, you know, even in the school systems, being treated like they're grown men, being handled like they're grown men. These little boys are being handled like they are, in fact, grown men. So I wish there was an easy answer for that, Marsha, that we can say at this age, you know, we have to really get our boys prepared, because now the world sees you as a fully grown man who is potentially a threat to them. But I think, unfortunately for us, the reality for us as people of color raising boys into men is to start teaching them, even at 3 years old, unfortunately, Marsha, that the world does not work the same way for everybody. And, you know, I have 3 sons. My oldest is turning 23, then I have an almost 9-year-old and an almost 7-year-old. And we're having a conversation now. And it's a shame that we have to have that conversation. But I think, unfortunately, as Black parents, if we don't, we're doing a disservice to our children, to our young boys, to not prepare them for the world that they're going into.
Okay.
Yeah. So
James, I know you work a lot with this. And so could you tell us a little bit about how my question, like, what do you tell your population about preparing their young guys, young children for encounters with injustice, dealing with the police, if you do those type of things?
Sure. So to be honest, it's no readily available answer, because we know that one can be as young as 3 or 7 years old, like, you know, the Tamir Rice incident, you know, just a young kid playing. So unfortunate, you know, we are scarred or blessed with the fact of having this amazing epidermis, which is our brown, Black, beautiful skin. And to some, it's, you know, it's difficult for them to view us as less than, just by the progress that we're making now, even though we didn't have the head start they had. So to me, to be honest with you, I think it's immediate threat starting, you know, within the school system, at that school level. I made a post the other day in regards to Ms. Connor, who called the police and, you know, was saying that she was threatened by the other Mr. Cooper. and the Bird Park Watcher. Like that happened to me when I was in school. I was not doing anything wrong, but the teacher, called the principal, had me removed and stuff like that. This was, I
Oh, wow.
could have been like in the 3rd or 4th grade, so things like that happens all the time. It's just unfortunate now that we'll be able to see them all around the world based on the fact of social media. So what we have to do, what I tend to do as a black male, as a model, as somebody that's displaying positive representation, is try to display certain characteristics that one would follow and that would not put me in immediate danger, which is still an issue because we know so many times throughout the course of the last couple of years, the other targets, the other birders have not been in situations that they call for to put themselves in danger either. So either way, it's a tough situation, so it's just difficult to have the conversation, but you definitely do want to ensure that you're articulating in such a way to translate it to that young one, your son, your grandkids, your nephews, or whomever, to let them know that, hey, these type of things happen within the world. It's up to us to change and to break the cycles.
Absolutely. And so my next thing is I wanted to talk about the incident in Central Park with, I think her name is Cooper as well as he is. Yeah. It's so sad that this day and age, so she knew she was going to weaponize the police against him. Now, she put out a nice apology, and I admit I kind of liked the apology until she got to the bottom and she said, my life has been destroyed. But she took no ownership of why your life was destroyed, what you did to cause these type of things. And it was saddened to me, and my community is diverse. Some Caucasians was more concerned about the dog than the man, and I understand because they're feeling in a way with the dog was in immediate danger, but she was trying to put the black man, Mr. Cooper, in immediate danger as well.
Yeah.
And it just amazed me how they were kind of fixated there. And it's hard to have conversations with them sometimes where they hear you. And have you all had any discussions where you were able to penetrate and for them to actually listen and do better the next time? Have you all had that? I can't say that I have. I've heard a lot of white people say, "Oh, this is disgusting. This is just, I don't like how this happened." But when I ask them, well, what are you gonna do about it? What are you gonna do other than just be disgusted? It's like, I've done my part just to say it's disgusting. I can't believe that happened. But what are you gonna do to help us with that? Because this has been going on and on and on. And let me get back to the looting for a moment. I don't agree with the looting, but I understand it. And what I mean, we've marched. We did sit-ins. We've asked for your help. We asked for consideration over and over and over. You didn't understand that. Now that your city is being destroyed, now because your dollars are being affected, now you understand. And I don't think white America, I don't think they can understand that, because they're saying one doesn't do with the other. But if you look over the life of an African American, it makes sense to us. Like I said, we may not condone it, but it makes sense because we're in pain, we're hurting it, and that is a way of getting a response, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Who would like to add to that?
James, you want to go ahead, man?
So, I mean, again, like the incident that she did was just indespicable and just disrespectful, because she know the potential of what could have occurred if the police would have arrived on scene. And, of course, he's large and gloomy in comparison to her. And just the fear in her voice on the phone, if he wasn't recording, it could have definitely been perceived a different way. He could have easily been, arrested or even put in defenseless holds, such as what we've seen with Mr. Floyd, just based on her lying, not even trying to articulate. She even, deserve an Oscar probably in the efforts of her trying to act so scared. But it's so dissatisfying to us as a community to have to deal with these things, especially me, just because I'm within the field. I still live in my community that I grew up in. I still want to give back. I still want to serve the people who are underserved and don't have access to certain things. So to me, it's just heartening to be able to do that and still receive backlash from different people within a different community on different issues pertaining to that. So,
Yes.
Even the unresolved trauma in itself is an issue for African Americans. Just viewing that can be traumatic for somebody, because her story specifically probably happened over and over in office buildings. Like somebody got caught, like separation conflict, like somebody probably got transferred because a coworker lied and said, hey, this person is threatening me or bullying me or whatever. I know people who lost jobs because of that when accusations like that wasn't true. So it's more than just her being in fear or lying on a bird watcher. This has happened throughout different sections of, America, I guess, just based on those things. And to be able to be in such privilege to use your ethnicity as a tool or as a way to bait somebody is just disrespectful and nasty.
Absolutely. I completely agree with what you said, James. And again, I think that this is the culture, unfortunately, of the dominant culture that we live in, that, this is an option for, a white woman in a situation that was clearly not a threatening situation, but one in which she felt entitled to do as she wished, which was to disregard the rules. And so we don't unfortunately enjoy that privilege, right?
Yes.
So we know that very clearly as people of color. We don't enjoy the privilege to be able to say, well, we're going to disregard the rules, right? And so he was simply, letting her know that she was in fact in violation of the rules, that the dog needed to be on a leash. And based on what I can tell and see, said that in a very appropriate and a very non-threatening way. And I believe that because of whatever her mentality was, or perhaps still is, that this was coming from a black man, that she did not have to take heed to what he was saying and was somewhat put off by the fact that he said anything to her. And so I think that again,
that's what I got.
Yeah, I think again, that's the attitude that says, and see, and she had an opportunity at any point when this thing started to escalate, to make a different choice. But to use James's word, it was despicable. It was disrespectful to go to the point where, okay, I'm not winning this, so now I'm going to pull this card on you because I know I can, as a white woman, say a black man, and that's all that needs to be really said on that call, black man. And there's going to be a certain level heightened of that response because it's a white woman and a black man. So I think that is the problem right there. What I do believe is something that is very, at least it's created some optimism for me recently. And we were downtown, my wife and I, my oldest son, were downtown Columbia just yesterday for the protests and the march that we had downtown Columbia. And to see so many, I'm gonna say non-people of color, okay, right? There was a lot of Caucasians and white young people there standing with Black Lives Matter signs, talking about white privilege, talking about how silence equals death, and really understanding the power of their privilege. And then we saw, a recent news story about the line of white women in Louisville that protected a group of black protesters that were protesting Breonna Taylor's death, that they stood in front of these black protesters in a show of solidarity to say, hey, we're with you, and if there's some harm is going to be done, you're going to come through us. So they're using their privilege because they knew that if they stand there, that the chances are that these people were going to be treated poorly or hurt or injured, these black people of color that were protesting, was very low. And so they were using their privilege, I believe, in a very responsible way. And so I was encouraged by that. And we need more of that. We need about 100 compared to one of those situations with Amy Cooper. And if we can get that going, I think we'll be moving in a much better direction, because the change has to come from within the dominant culture. And I love to see that. And I did see that yesterday here in Columbia, and to see these stories popping up, it really does give me some encouragement.
Yes, and I saw where the Amish stepped in to help.
Yes.
And I don't even think they have TVs and stuff, so that was humbling to see them come in and assist any way that they can. I want to ask you two a question. and it may be controversial, but I'm going to ask it. Now, I know racism have been around forever, especially my lifetime, my dad, my granddad's. Do you think President Obama ushered this in, or Donald Trump? And what I mean by President Obama, I think he was a wonderful president, and I hold him in high regard. But when he became our president, I know they said a lot of hate crimes and stuff started increasing. So what I mean is, because he took office, do you think that caused people to feel like, how dare we elect a black man to be over our country, and it started? Or do you think Donald Trump, ushered this in? What are your thoughts on that?
To be honest with you, I would honestly say it's an issue beyond these two presidencies.
Uh-huh.
I mean, because even if we look back in the 80s with the crack laws, those were disparities as well against African Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, moving forward to the '94 crime bill, those also were disparities within African Americans. They still got African Americans right now locked up for more time than any other counterparts or ethnicities.
Mm-hmm.
So to just put it on these last two, or the current administrations, I think would be unfair and a disservice. However, I would say, since he is the first African American president, I guess people was looking for him to do things differently or more readily accessible to assist the Black and brown people. But unfortunately, in his defense, I don't think he could have specifically said, "Hey, this is for Black people." Because just imagine if he would have said that 8 years ago, his first term, and now with this current president, he definitely would have got in and said, "Hey, this right here is for white people." So it's a twofold. It's a lose-lose in that situation. So, and even without the first African American president saying, "Hey, this is for Black people," this current president is still lining up things specifically for people that are race baiting. People that are in positions of power. Even if you look at the education system, the education budgets that they're cutting, the job disparities, the displacements, as far as the disproportionate in medical supplies and different stuff like that. It's still a lot of ignorance to, I guess, this administration, but I wouldn't specifically say it's his fault, just based on a lot of different things that transpired throughout history.
Okay. Not saying it was anybody's fault. I was just wondering, because it seemed like it's more and more. And I know now we have technology, things are being recorded now like never before. But I'm just wondering, like, when did the dynamics change where it's just getting like it's every day now, every day, constantly. It's constant racial issues. Now, I have issues with our current president. I'm gonna leave it right there. I was always raised to respect the president. But I don't feel like he has the knowledge of mental health or just community to
He doesn't
understand.
have empathy. He doesn't have empathy or basic
absolutely.
decency.
Yes, and I don't think he has a diverse population at the White House. And some of the things he say, I just don't understand. How can you say what happened? And his vocabulary is a little worse than mine. It's like, when he was like, things happen very badly, very badly. It was a bad thing. But then the next day, if things don't happen, they're thugs, and we're gonna send the National Guard in to handle them, to manage them, instead of trying to come out and have a discussion. This is a time to heal. This is a time to do this. What can we do in these areas, especially now that we're dealing with this and COVID-19? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I tend to agree with you, Marsha. I think that, unfortunately, the current president, if I can critique the way that a few issues, major issues, national issues, worldwide issues, but particularly, let's just start with this one, right? With the killing, the senseless killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, had a way of, when these types of incidents happen, of coming on and speaking to the heart of everybody. He had a way of unifying people around a humanistic level as opposed to politicizing things. He had a way of helping people to understand that although this may be something you're seeing on TV, something you're seeing on social media, just quick sound bites, these are actual people's lives that are being affected here. He had a very real way of connecting with people on a human level. And I'll leave it at that. I think that this is what would have been, this is what I sorely missed when this happened. Barack Obama coming out and speaking and giving a heartfelt, condolences to the family of Mr. George Floyd, and really speaking to those individuals first and foremost, and to the people of color around the world who saw this, right, and who are still perhaps living vicariously, traumatically through this experience. He just had a very good way of doing that, and I really miss that in our president, to have somebody who's able to take such a horrible trauma and be able to help people begin the healing process. And so I'll leave it at that. I don't believe that our current president does that in a very good way to help people begin to heal from these types of things.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you. I don't think, and it's okay. Maybe that's not his skill set, but I don't think he has empathy, just like James said. Mm-hmm. But if you're lacking something, it's unfortunate that he can't say, I may not be the best one to speak to this. Let me get somebody in here that could kind of help heal this nation and heal in these certain areas. And he's not taking advantage of that, and that people like me are still looking to President Obama to say something, to be the him or Michelle, and it's unfortunate, and I don't know Melania Trump. I don't really see her much at all, or I don't even really know what organizations she's like, that she speaks about, that she's the advocate of. So it's really just disheartening, that we can't even look there.
She made a post yesterday.
She did?
Yeah, yesterday or the day before, about the, unfortunate deaths of Mr. Floyd and the protests and stuff like that. But I'm almost certain that she didn't write it. Just based on how it was articulated. And it's not a shot at her education nor her dialect or diction, but just the wording. You can tell that it was written by somebody else, which is cool as long as they're putting a different type of message out. But the unfortunate thing is with the current guy in the office is, even if you don't want to address the hatred itself or the untimeliness of certain issues, you can still have a response team immediately available if that is such. Even the guy that's running against him now, Biden, he's been all over the news by, addressing certain issues and trying to make change and implement different things. So I think it's definitely in character, that speaks not only in a man's life, but in a leadership position, so if you are going to be in that position, you should uphold certain standards, and those standards should be not running from the media when they ask you tough questions. The other day he didn't even take questions, and following the protest. So you can't be doing things like that and then going to Twitter and putting out information that are threatening not only to society, but just the whole, just the totality of things that's surrounding it.
Absolutely. And I wanted to go back to what the reason for this broadcast was about African-American men, mental health and trauma. I want to know, when in your office, what are men mostly coming in for African-American men, or do you feel like there is a need for therapy for African-American men, but for some reason they're hesitant to go in? Could you speak to that?
I can. My movement was birthed out of the lack of engagements within overall wellness with men, not just the physical, but of course the mental. And some of those disparities are based on the stigmas placed upon us based on, from a societal standpoint, equating vulnerability to weakness. Just the older generations that still fear, if I give you this information, you're going to use it against me, then my livelihood can potentially be at stake, or my kids can get taken away and stuff like that. So, and even, to divert off a little bit, if we look at a couple of weeks ago, the French people, the doctors that wanted to test the COVID medicine on Africans. So stuff like that is going to continue to propel, like, why would I want to go to the doctor or seek services if you're going to use it against me? So, and of course we know about the Tuskegee experiments and stuff like that.
Yes.
So, it's just hard for one to want to seek services if you feel that your information will be used against you. And then, of course, unfortunately, hate to say it, but religion's played a part in that as well. You can pray it away, or just growing up, a lot of things that goes on in this house has to stay in this house. So a lot of people are afraid to take family business outside of the family, and they feel that they can, talk to their peers or family members and get the services that they need. But my job and what I have done, and I'm guessing I'm doing a pretty decent job, is because it's growing so well, is re-educate people on why they need certain things addressed, letting them know it's not an issue, it's not weakness, it's not unbecoming if you are feeling certain things. Some of the primary things I see, of course, is unresolved trauma that manifests itself in anger, aggression, substance use, and stuff like that. But I also see depression. So I find myself re-educating men on the different symptomology of certain diagnoses, and using it in a way to let them know that it's okay to have certain feelings and things like that. But when it starts impairing or impacting your day-to-day actions or other functions or other areas of your life, then we got to address it. So, I mean, I couldn't tell you guys how many times I hear, like, no, man, depression is a female diagnosis. I'm 6'5", I play football. Okay, all right, well, let's talk about your appetite. Let's talk about your sleep pattern. How, you lost the interest of pleasure. Are you isolating? Are you still hanging with your teammates and stuff like that? So when I break it down to them, they're like, oh man, like this did happen to me, this week and last week. And, so, hey boss, that's depression. There's nothing wrong with that. Now that we know what it is, let's work on ways to better, address it, so it wouldn't be lingering. And a lot of people don't know the mental health can affect your physical health, like hypertension. Heart disease is one of the leading causes of death for African-American men, and that can stem from additional stress, lack of cardiovascular activities and stuff like that. So pretty much, man, what my movement does is pretty much get in tune and in depth with different men and re-educate them on certain things so they can be overall well for not only themselves, but for their family, so they can be good partners, good fathers, and good co-workers and stuff like that, good pillars within the community. A whole you is a better you.
Absolutely. Reese, what are your thoughts?
I mean, James covered a lot of ground, a lot of the same things that I would have shared. Some of the things that I see are very much the same that James sees. We Black men are not necessarily allowed a space to be vulnerable and a space to really even begin to have these types of conversations. We're just not groomed that way. We're not in our culture, and frequently in our families as well. We're not allowed. Little boys are told to tough it up. Be strong, quit that crying. You're not really allowed to be sensitive. But we do allow that, and we do allow our little baby girls, to do that. We hate to see them cry and be hurt. But with our little boys, we see that as a weakness, right? And we jump all over them. And so you grow up learning that crying or sensitivity or being in pain emotionally is a weakness. And so you suck it in, you hide it, you don't talk about it. And, and sometimes that comes out, as James said, in aggression and violence and, all these types of other maladaptive behaviors, because we have not been given a space or given even sometimes the language. A lot of the brothers that I work with, they don't even know how to put words to what they're feeling, much less identify the feelings, right? So a lot of what we're trying to do is, number one, is make the space safe to have the conversation to begin with, and then let's put some vocabulary to what exactly is going on. Because for men, anger covers a multitude of emotions. I mean, we can be anxious and it presents as anger. We can be scared or uncertain, because we're the providers. If something is not lining up, we don't get excuses. We have to figure it out and make it happen. And if we can't figure that out and we feel incompetent and unable to provide and be there for our families the way we want to, it comes out as anger, right? Mm-hmm. We can be hurting, like James said, physical, somatic symptoms. It comes out as anger. We're just not given a lot of opportunity to develop the vocabulary to talk about all the different range of emotions as men that we have, right? And so everything just comes out as anger and aggression. And I think that's unfortunate because there's unspoken trauma that's beneath that. There's a lot of betrayals that happen as boys. And I always say that betrayed boys turn into mad men, right? If we don't express what has happened to us and deal with those traumas that we've been carrying around for so long, it will come out. And I always say to the guys that said, look, you either deal with these dragons in the closet, these emotions that you're stuffing down, or they will deal with you. You know, it'll come out in your relationships with your partners, with your spouse, with your children, with your employer. It's going to come out, right? Because we're only human. So it's going to come out in some way. And so our hope as clinicians is to help it come out in a healthy way and to give a healthy expression to all of these things that we feel and experience as Black men. And so, you know, James said it, addiction. I see a lot because I work a lot with couples. So I see a lot with Black men with, you know, serial infidelity. And what I have found is this a pretty consistent link between childhood sexual abuse with men that are serial cheaters. And they don't even understand how that, because they've never talked about it. And a lot of times it comes out for the first time in the session that they're doing marital counseling with their wives. And they'll talk about how they were oftentimes, you know, sexually molested by an older woman. And so these kids, you know, as young boys, they have been, you know, sexualized at a very, very young age.
Can I
and
stop you right
so
there?
that happens,
Question?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when that happens, do they tell their parents, or is it like, oh boy, look at you, you know, or is it looked at as a positive thing? I'm asking because I've heard it both ways. Like when they go and report that they have been abused, it's like, it's a congratulations, when it's actually, and I think a rapper came out about how he had some
his sons
and nephews, he had somebody perform oral sex on them, and it was like he did a justice to them. He didn't see that as abuse. And so I'm just wondering, when they go and you talk about taking the layers back, do they talk to you about how that may have affected them? Like, you know, they may not say it anymore if they continue to kind of be abused.
Yeah, they often, like many victims, whether it be females or young boys, they don't tell. A lot of times it's not reported, and I think it's especially unreported in men and boys. They just don't talk about it. And I think you're right to a great degree, Marsha. When the perpetrator is a female, an older female, it creates that other level of complexity. As well, was it really abuse? Especially if it may have been pleasurable to a certain degree, right? You know, so all of these conflicting things are happening. And when you're an 8, 9, 10-year-old boy or 11-year-old, 12-year-old boy just entering to puberty, and this is your first indoctrination into sexual behavior, right? No one has prepared you emotionally for what that does to you. Nobody prepares you for, you know, that this is actually a power and control, because that older woman is exploiting this child, this boy, for their own sexual need. And so all of the reciprocity, emotional attachment, all of that is supposed to happen in that type of a relationship. At 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, you have no clue. You're not in any shape, form, or fashion emotionally prepared to engage, nor can you give consent to something like that. And so most of them never told. Most of the men that I've worked with they never told anybody. You know, they just sort of kept rolling with it, like, you know, and did not connect until we started talking about and really going back to, and a lot of times it was multiple incidents of it. It wasn't just one. It was multiple incidents of these young men or boys before they reached puberty, often being molested by older women. Men too, but oftentimes the ones that I've seen a connection with serial cheating is females that abuse them as boys.
Not only the serial cheating is a result of that, but the ability to want to have different sex partners and stuff like that is a result of that, because they're using the sex as a means of escape from whatever that situation is, whether it is anger, aggression, substance. You know, it's pretty much a coping skill that they're using now, that they're turning to based on that result. And a lot of people don't know, because when they were at that younger age or during that time,
Wow.
it probably was viewed as a badge of honor. Oh man,
Absolutely.
you got your older woman, you got your piece or whatever, So for them to continue to want to deal with it and or having no control over dealing with it because it was in an abuse fashion, now as they're older, it's manifesting its way and being displayed in negative behavior, not only affecting them internally, but their partner in that relationship.
Absolutely.
So it's difficult for them to process it and link the two based on that correlation, because they don't see that what happened to me at 8 or 9 is affecting my sex drive with my current wife, or me wanting certain things from my current relationship. No, all of that ties together. But of course, they're not in our position or had the fortunates to, obtain the education level that we have, the case studies, and the different research that we've conducted to know that these things can be correlated to that. So that's why it's our job to ensure that we translate and educate them on it.
That's right. That's right. And what happens a lot of times, to connect with what you were just saying, James, is they're struggling with intimacy in these relationships. And so they're jumping from one physical sexual relationship to the next, to the next, to the next. And there is no intimacy. They're not able to really be fully emotionally vulnerable with one person. And so because that boundary violation happened at such a young age and they were betrayed as boys, they have never really started out with a healthy model of what a emotional and sexual relationship is supposed to look like with two consenting people. And so they don't know how to be intimate. And so, that's why it continues to be a pattern of just a release of anxiety that builds up. And as James said, it becomes a coping mechanism, just like pornography or just like weed or just like alcohol. It becomes a means to cope with anxiety, because when this is happening, best believe, even though it may be a little bit exciting and even physically feels, sensationally good to them, they know it's wrong. Intrinsically, they all know that it's wrong. Every last one of these men told me that they knew that it was wrong. Even as little boys, they knew that what was being done to them by these older women or men was wrong, right? And so it creates this dissonance within yourself, and they don't have, again, there's no way to talk about it. There's no way to process what happened. And so they go through their lives trying to figure this out, really, by recreating the same trauma over and over again.
Yeah, and it goes to different relationship to relationship. And so realistically, right, if you're using a coping mechanism such as alcohol, right, you drink a bottle of alcohol, get behind a car, you crash your car. That's a result of that trauma that you didn't address. So this right here, even if a lot of people don't look at it this way, but I think this is research that I'm probably going to do within the next couple of years. There's a lot of unwanted or single family homes within the African American community based on the same trauma. Just think about it. This person or many different men use sex as a way to escape, as a way to cope, as a way to do different things. And the result of that oftentimes is unwanted pregnancies and or pregnancies, so that's why it's multiple single families. It's, all of this plays a point in it, because just like the alcohol, he used it to escape and cope. It's just unfortunate that, he crashed the car from the drink. And then from this, he used sex as a way to escape and, had an unwanted pregnancy with multiple women and stuff like that. So it's unfortunate. So people don't look at the totality of the actual issues and get to the root of the issues. So it's definitely our job to ensure that we uncovering it and present those layers so it wouldn't happen.
So this has been some really good conversation. I'm going to go for about another 10 minutes. If you have any questions, please put them down in the chat and so that I can get those answered for you. Also, make sure that you like and share. This has been a very good session, and I want people to be able to have the information. And if you look in the chat, if you are a male that wants to speak to an African American male, please seek out therapyforblackmen.org. I did put that in the chat. If you would like to continue a conversation with James Harris or Reese Palmer, I have put their information in the chat as well. I want to ask a question though. What can we do to help our white counterparts in the field to help them to prepare for these types of things, or making sure that they may not, let them know that it's okay, that you may not be able to help every African American male or female that comes into your office because you don't have the experience or the training to do so. And that doesn't take anything away from you, but ultimately it is our job to make sure that that client is being well taken care of and that every issue is being addressed. What would you say to a counterpart that happens to be white, and say, if they come to you and say, how can I help? What can I do? What would you suggest to them?
Oh man, definitely want to be attentive and supportive and validate that person's feelings. You might not go through it personally, but it's also important that you display a certain type of empathy in what they feel comfortable enough to relay to you. So that information should be, I guess, cherished in a sense, for one to feel comfortable enough and open enough to view you as such person to address the issues that they're presented with you. So definitely want to ensure that you're open enough and willing to carry the load of what they're about to display on you, and then support the African American ones that are actually doing the work. You know, be that ear, be that guide, be that resource, even if it's behind the scenes if you have to, because it is difficult work. It is hard being from the community and of the community while serving the community. So to be an outsider and not being able to answer the questions correctly or have the direct information, you definitely want to do your part in just being there, however they need you to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think also, you know, one of the things that I mentioned earlier, Marcia, that I was very pleased to see is more people, white people, are being willing to acknowledge white privilege, and that this is a thing, this is a phenomenon that is real, that is entrenched into our system of institutional racism. That you being born with white skin affords you certain privileges that a person that has a darker melanin tone, that they don't have those privileges. And you don't do anything to earn it or not earn it. It's just the way that our society is, unfortunately. And so I think that it's very important for them to acknowledge that, and to acknowledge, you know, that we all have our own biases. You know, there's biases that we develop from our family, from our experiences, from our culture. So we have to acknowledge those things. And then also acknowledge power, and that you're dealing with people that are marginalized, that do not enjoy power, that struggle in many, many ways that you cannot fully relate with. And so being able to take the one down position and say, hey, I'm trying to understand how I can best support you. And if I don't understand your experience fully, I can't fully empathize with you and I can't fully support you. So I need to take a step back and take a one down position and say, help me understand what it's like for you. You know, teach me, help me to, you know, and that takes a certain level of humility, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that that's the biggest piece is there has to be a natural, or even if you have to work at, a curiosity as to what it really feels like to walk in my shoes as a black man or a person of color. So I think that it's all of those things, Marcia, as a white clinician. Acknowledge your own bias, acknowledge your white privilege, acknowledge the power that comes along with that white privilege, and what it feels like for a person of color that has a system that's set up not to work for them, and be willing to be humble enough to say, hey, can you teach me? Can you help me, educate me on what that, and I think that it's incumbent upon us as black people, as people of color, that when a person who is of non-color is truly, genuinely interested in wanting to know, to tell them, to really lay it out for them. I think sometimes we get kind of tired of having to explain to non-people of color what it feels like to be black or a person of color. But I think when someone is truly seeking that truth, and you can tell that they're really genuine, and I've been fortunate that I have a lot of people who are non-people of color in my circle and over the years that are truly genuine folk, and they want to know, right? And these people existed even back during the abolitionist times, right? So we know that there are people who understand that just because you have a different skin color, it does not make you inferior, and they understand that the important thing is about all of our humanity. So I think it's incumbent upon us as Black people that when you have someone who is not Black or non-person of color who really wants to know, and they genuinely are interested so that they can support and be a help, right? I think we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to the movement and to that person to say, hey, this is what it feels like, and this is the best way you can support a person of color that is struggling.
Absolutely. We have a statement, but I'm going to show it. Gloria Searles is saying, I think healing will come when we are all honest and have a real conversation. I agree with that, and I'm going to piggyback, because conversation is great. But I want us to move past the conversation and start applying, putting some action in place. I want us to be able to first, let's start with our senses. Make sure you're doing your senses to let people know what type of services are needed in the area. Talk to your local government about maybe putting somebody helping accountability with police officers and particular trainings. And also talking to the different colleagues that we have of all different races, because I hear a lot of support for the LGBT community, and I'm not bashing the LGBT community. I like how they have gotten together, pushed their agenda, getting support. But what I would say to that is this: why is it when African Americans are trying to get their agenda across, a wall goes up? You don't want to hear it. It's the same thing. Oh, this that has nothing to do with race and all these type of things. And we're trying to tell you it does. It does have to do with race. And that's why these issues keep happening. Help us with our agenda, just like you help everybody else with their agenda. Take part and take ownership. And I'm asking you to do more than be outraged. What are you going to do after the outrage stop? What are you going to do a month from now when something else happens? What are you going to do, not only African American, but everybody in that area that was affected? What are you going to do to make sure things changed or done a little bit different? Here in North Carolina, I am in North Carolina. James is in Virginia and Reese is in South Carolina. But here in North Carolina, in mental health, if I'm having a mental health issue with a client, I call a crisis intervention officer. That is an officer that has been trained to help with mental health. And so that's why I was asking earlier, if you have to have special training to assist me with somebody with a mental health issue, maybe you need to give that training to everybody for people to have compassion and empathy and not automatically look at somebody, oh, they're darker complexion, or it's a guy, I'm gonna I'm going to do this, and that, give them a hard time. And I try to explain that to white America, my white America that's local to me. Me and you can get a speeding ticket, but I'm more likely to go to jail and get my fingerprints and all that for the exact same thing. And that's a race issue. No ways about it. And if you are African American male, you are 10 times more likely to go to jail, spend 12 hours or 24 hours for the exact same thing. And that's what you need to understand. Help us with our agenda, just like you help with other agendas, if that makes sense. Because like I said, I like how the LGBT movement, they have gotten their point across, and we're trying to do that, and we've been trying to do that for decades and decades. And maybe this is an opportunity now to come back to the table, but also push our agenda for safety, for making sure that we're treated as human, to make sure that you have compassion when you're dealing with someone of color, making sure that you're not weaponizing the police against us, making sure that you're concerned about our children, just like we're concerned about yours. And what I mean by that is, a little boy was about to run out in the street. All I saw was a baby. I went out there and tried to get him out the way. And what I'm saying to you, I would have done that for a child, regardless of color, or I would have done that for a teenager. But what I'm concerned about, you may do that for my baby, but will you do that for my teenager? Will you give him grace just like I would do? So let's have some conversation, definitely. But let's get a game plan, so in a month or so, you can say, well, Marsha, this is what I've done, this is what I've implemented, or this is what I'm suggesting. And look inside yourself. If you know you got issues with Black people or any minority, address it, deal with it, get you some help, get you some healing. Okay. I'm not, I'm not going to be long with it with today. And this conversation is definitely not going to end with just us. We're just trying to get you to put your eyes on yourself for a moment, so there can stop being George Floyd's in this lifetime had to have a knee to his neck, and everybody saw that and crying for his mother. Let's stop with that. Let's start there. Did that make sense? Is that fair? What do you guys think?
Absolutely, absolutely. I really appreciate the way that you use the type of organization and the type of advocacy you see, in the gay and the LGBTI, QI community. I do think that you see a lot of really, really significant support. They're organized, they're passionate. You even see that with people who support PETA and animal rights.
Absolutely.
We can get that same type of push, that same type of passion and advocacy for people of color, and really pushing forward the agenda of equality, true racial equality in this country, and making sure that we and our children can walk down the street just as much as anybody else's child and not have to be in fear of their lives. I think that is just as worthy of a cause to get behind as any of these other causes that we've discussed.
Absolutely. So what I want to do is in here, I want James and Reese to have their closing remarks. I want to stop here just because this conversation can go on and on and on. And we will revisit this again. Probably in a few more weeks, we will revisit this because I think it's a topic that needs to be addressed. It needs to be talked about. African American men are very special. We want to support them, making sure that they have all the services that they need, making them understand that it's okay to get therapy. And also the people who want to help them, letting them know of some resources to connect them to, just like I said, therapyforblackmen.org or James' organization, Men to Heal. Did I say that right, James?
Yes, ma'am. mentoheal.com.
.com, or if you're in the South Carolina area, visit Reese at Palmer Counseling. Is that correct, Reese?
PalmerCounsel.com.
Yes, and we'll be waiting on his book to hopefully come out. Maybe this will be the motivation you need to get that book pushed out.
Little kick in the pants I need. Yeah,
absolutely. But I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time to listen to us. And if you want us to talk about some other specific issues, please email me. Let me know what you want to discuss, and I'd be more than happy to do that for you. Okay. So I'm going to start with Reese, and James, you can end. Reese, is there any closing remarks that you would like to say?
Yeah, the only thing that I would like to say, Marsha, is first of all, thank you very much for having me and James on to have this conversation. I really truly appreciate it, and I do consider it an honor whenever we have an opportunity to come on and talk about the things that we're passionate about, which is making sure that people of color in our community are taking advantage of the types of supports and services that are out there to help us heal. And so I think it's a wonderful opportunity that you provided. So thank you very much for that, Marsha. I will say this, that there's an old Shakespeare saying that says, "To thine own self be true." Yes. And so we have to be honest with ourselves. And if we're hurting and we're struggling and we know that we're going through some difficulties and we have different issues going on in our lives, whether it be issues with depression or anxiety or some type of addiction or just challenges with our relationships, it is okay to get help. It is not a sign or symbol of weakness to say, hey, I need some help. Let me go talk to somebody that might be able to help me and just, walk with me on my journey for a little bit, So I just want to encourage everybody. It's really important that we continue to stomp out the stigma that surrounds Black mental health and mental health in general, and so that people will feel less of a burden, less of barriers to going and getting the help that they truly need, so that they can go on to live the type of lives that God created them to live. So I'm really passionate about that. So I'll leave it at that. I could talk on and on and on about that, but I want people to get help and go on and do what they need to do, because God has a purpose and a plan for all of us.
Yes. All
Okay.
right, James, you have last words?
Yeah. Reese, nice to meet you, boss.
You too, James.
Marsha, appreciate you for having me on, and definitely want to echo what you said about men seeking help, receiving services. Again, that's what my movement is for, men2heal.com. And I also wrote a book that is now out. You can get it at Amazon, Walmart, Barnes and Nobles. It's on pre-order, but if you go to my site directly, you can get it within a week or two based on your shipping. And it's pretty much just a tool that not only men can use, but it can be used for couples. A wife can purchase his book, give it to her husband. He complete the exercises, and she can flip through it and see what's troubling him, see how come he doesn't express his feelings, or see what's previous traumas he's had or whatever the case, and open that dialogue so they can discuss it together. In hopes to have better communication within a relationship. It's for young men 10 to have an age you want to. It's a great tool. But again, I appreciate you guys for having me. If you're looking for therapy, though, feel free to go to psychologytoday.com. You can put the criteria in and specify what type of therapist you're seeking, whether that be woman, man, Asian, African American, or whomever. And of course, therapyforblackmen.org, therapyforblackgirls.org, my website, Reese's website. It's so many tools out there if you are
Yes, it is.
serious and open to seeking help. And lastly, I had an article published in Psychology Today last month on the depressed beast, and it's talking about the man and depression. So I address certain stigmas and different things like that within that article. So again, feel free to reach out to me
Could
if
you
you need
send me
it.
that link?
To the article?
Yes, I could put it in the chat for them.
Sure. It's also on my website.
Okay.
It's a couple of different articles on my website with different news outlets and stuff like that. So definitely appreciate you guys. Check it out. Let me know if you have any questions.
All right. Well, again, we want to thank you so much for everyone who tuned in. This is your professional sister, and may God's best belong to you. Thank you so much. Guys, if you hold on.